Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, which is Conversational Mastery for Safety Professionals. This is hosted by the IOSH Public Services Group, and I'm Claire Thompson, the chair of that group. Our speaker today is Karin Ovari, and in a few moments I'll hand over to Karin. The webinar is being recorded and will be available afterwards for people who may not be able to stay quite to the end. And also, if we don't manage to get through all the Q&As at the end, Karin has kindly agreed to put the answers together, which will either be a short video or written answers, which will be circulated. I am going to do my best to keep an eye on the Q&As. So if you've got any questions, put them in the Q&A section, and hopefully we'll get through as many of them as we can at the end. The other thing I just wanted to make you aware of was the IOSH Public Services Group have got another webinar coming up soon, which is on ISO 45003, which is psychological health and safety. That's on the 4th of June. And if you head over to the events and webinar page on the IOSH website, you'll get information on that. So just a little bit about Karin. So Karin is an experienced facilitator and leadership coach with over 30 years experience in this area, working with organisations to enhance communication, strengthen safety leadership and create cultures that drive better outcomes. As a safety professional, I'm sure you will know like I do, just how important these conversations are and can really make an impact. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Karin. Thank you, Karin.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. I'm just going to do the whole share screeny thingy. And now, can everybody see that? Give me a little thumbs up or whatever it is. Yay, good stuff. All right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for allowing me, and thank you, Claire, for inviting me, and to Amir, who's in the background, who'll be supporting me through this process as well. So as Claire said, do put your questions into the chat. We'll do the best we can. There's quite an extraordinary number of people coming online, which is eternally grateful for. I'm guessing it's the conversational mastery topic that got you here. So that's wonderful. So with that, thank you. To get set up for this, we are going to do 3 rounds, 3 different polls. So please scan the QR code right now and get yourself set up on your phone or wherever you want to do that. If anybody needs an actual code, you can go to slido.com is another option, and there is a code for that, but we can put that into the chat if necessary. However, scan it. Again, give me some indicators that you're ready, because that screen's going to go away in just a moment. I'll just give everybody a minute because there's quite a few people there. Claire, I was just thinking we might need to, for other people who are coming on, or Amir, for people who are coming on after we get started, they won't see this code. Maybe we can put into the chat ever so often the slide.com with the hash 2162515, just to make it a bit easier for people as they come in. So thank you. I do have a few little notes in front of me, so just bear with me as I get rid of them. So let's continue. So this is in 40 minutes, we're not going to change the world. Let me just be clear about that, okay? Just a little bit more about me. I have actually co-authored a couple of books around changing conversations for a changing world. Interestingly, they were written through that period that shall remain unnamed. And I am a co-host of the podcast, In Conversation with the Safety Collaborators, which is kind of taking a little hiatus at the minute. However, but for the purpose of this, I've done lots of different things in my lifetime. I've spent quite a bit of years offshore as a safety coach. and then managing businesses and things since then. And I come from Sydney, Australia, and those little yellow dots represent the places I've lived so far, and currently in the northeast of Scotland. And I also do some volunteer work with the RNLI, which is taking up a lot of my time at the moment, just quietly. So, as I say, this is 40 minutes. We're not going to, change the world. However, I hope to give you some insights into, and maybe a look internally as to, oh, maybe I can change something here or change something there. A lot of this body of work comes from two schools that I'm involved with. One is conversational intelligence, and the other is the Better Conversations Foundation. And so this workshop is a little mixture of the two. So Judith E. Glazer, who's my mentor from Conversational Intelligence, sort of said getting to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture, which depends on the relationships, which depends on the quality of the conversations. I tend to flip that on its head. Everything starts with a conversation. Even when you get up in the morning, you're having a conversation with yourself. So there's going to be a conversation of some sort before you even get out of bed. So let's think about that. So really, if we can improve the quality of our conversations, that leads to improving the quality of our relationships, which leads to the improvement of the quality of our culture. And the organizational culture, workplace culture, family culture, doesn't really matter which one. So it applies to kind of all of them. So I sort of tend to say conversational mastery equals better conversations. And better conversations don't just happen, they are built. And when you build them well, everything else follows. Trust improves, better decisions are made, and you have safer outcomes. We can deal better with the more challenging conversations that we need to have. If we want to change behavior, it tends to be through conversation. So conversational mastery is about understanding the hidden mechanics of how we speak, listen, and respond. And it's the difference between people hearing your words and actually understanding what you've said. I'm sure this has happened to all of us, and it doesn't even matter where we are in the world. We sort of will say something, and to us it made perfectly good sense, and then you're wondering why the person went in the other direction. Surely they just agreed that they were going to go in that direction, but they went that way. So somewhere there's a disconnect. I've also had many people say to me over the years, look, I've told them 10 times. They get a bit shocked when I turn around and say, well, maybe you need to change the way you're telling them because the first 10 didn't work. So this is kind of where we're heading with this concept of conversational mastery leading to better conversations. And in high-risk industries, in the work that we do, that you do every day, that conversation is critical to your success. So I tend to say that, we can change our conversations to change minds. Now, to be clear, only any person, their individual, can change their mind, but you can influence that mind change. So if we can change conversations to influence the change of mind, it's the catalyst for changing outcomes. So it's not about being a better talker. It's actually about knowing what kind of conversation your team or the person that you're talking with needs in that moment. And there are many different types of conversations that we can have. So this is our first little poll. I want you to actually do a check-in. And so you don't have to close your eyes. That's perfectly optional. I can't see you anyway. But take a moment. I really want you to just take a breath, take a deep breath, and take a moment to check in with yourself. What do you notice? Pay attention to you. Don't worry about what's going on around you. What are your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions? What are you sensing? It could be how you're sitting. It could be, is your big toe cold? What are those feelings? And then I want you to go to your Slido. The first question's probably up. And on a scale of 1 to 10, go 0 is not okay. I'm not feeling so great. And then there's a whole range up to 10, I feel fantastic. And just about this moment. So get onto your Slido, give that a bit of a quick check-in. And then in a moment, my screen will disappear and the poll will come up. So we can get a sense of where everybody is on that scale. Amir? How are we doing? I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Nope. Right. Let me go and check on my phone, see if I can see it. All right, I can actually see, you can probably see the results on your phone. So we've got, not everybody's at 10. Looks like we've got a lot of 8s. We have a little bit of not okay, so just hold on to those numbers and we'll see where we go with that. How many people have we got coming in? Yeah. 8. There's lots of people in the 8s. That's nice. So, but what does this actually mean? I'll come back to what those numbers actually mean in a minute. But for this, if you think about one thing for what is the session objective for today, I want you to think about what kind of conversation do you want to be better at after this session? So just hold that thought in the back of your mind as we go through the rest of this event. In the world of better conversations, we have 5 modules, but today I'm only going to focus on state. So how do your thoughts and feelings affect your conversations? And if you stay to the end, there is a little invitation. You'll see an invitation at the bottom corner there. I'll invite you into a community that you might be able to continue this conversation with, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the session. So let's think about state. We talk about state as the 3-state model. How do your thoughts and feelings affect your conversations? And we do use the traffic light model for this reason. So your emotional landscape influences your interactions. Positive feelings can foster meaningful dialogue, while stress creates barriers to meaningful dialogue. Our mental state affects not just our responses, but even the tone of our conversation. So, if I'm not feeling so great, I'm probably not going to sound, yay, hi, how's everyone doing? It's probably going to be a little bit more subdued. So having this self-awareness allows us to adjust our approach. And it's important for you, but also for the people around you and for what you need to do next. Right? So let's look at that traffic light model. So for those of you who were in the numbers of 0 to 4, right, you're probably not okay. Right? And what I'd invite you to do is take care of yourself, even right now in this moment. You'll be experiencing some strong, maybe some unpleasant emotions. You may have a bit of fight, flight, freeze mode. You might be a little bit, oh, I've heard this before, same stuff, different day. What it's really telling you is that some of your basic needs are not being met and your well-being may be impacted by that. So in this case, we say red state equals stop. Sometimes you need to take a break. Now, we don't have time to go into some tools that you can use, but, breathing is one of them. And what I mean by that is taking an intentional breath to slow down. Another little trick, actually, I sometimes say to people, so you can put up your hand, and if you can do it under the table, you don't have to do it in front of a room of people. But, if you then trace your finger up and around, and with each up, you breathe in, with each down, you breathe out. You breathe up, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. By the end of that, you'll be surprised how much more calmer you might feel in the moment. Now, that's on the assumption it's a short-term red state. If it's a longer-term red state, you may need to consider something more in depth. If your numbers were somewhere between 7 and 10, then you're doing pretty well. You know, you're feeling good, you're connected with yourself and with others. You're probably much more open to possibility, to opportunity. You're maybe quite excited about what's coming up. So in this case, you know, the world is in your favor at this moment. So this we say is the green state. So you're good to go. It's a good time to have conversations. It might be a good time to have an intervention if need be, etc. And then, of course, if you're a 4 to 7, you're in that, you're not completely okay, but you know, you understand where you're at. You might be a little bit unsure. You might find yourself in an environment that you're not uncertain about what's going on around you, for example. You know, what are the unwritten rules around here, for another example. So you might also be concerned about somebody else's welfare. So that could be impacting you. And of course, this is our amber yellow state. And it just says proceed with caution. So this is a really handy tool that you can adopt for yourself. And you might even want to do it with your team. It's something you can do anonymously. You can create little polls. You know, you can use a Google form or something. There's lots of different ways you can use this tool. So I really encourage you to notice your own emotional state on a regular basis. Tap into that. Take a moment. You know, in the heat of the moment, we tend to forget to do this. I still, you know, it's every day is a new day for that. And even with lots of training, we're still, depending on the type of person we are, sometimes we dive off where we shouldn't be. So just a little bit of field work, if you wanted to, is to notice your state and how and when it changes for you. You know, if you really want to measure this, you could even do, you know, do a little journaling or something along those lines. So try mapping it to this traffic light system. And notice how you feel before and after conversations, even the good conversations, you know, the ones that are positive. And for me, conversations are not about negative or positive. They're actually about healthy and unhealthy. And even if you're having a tough conversation with someone, or you're having, you know, having to have one of those coffee style conversations, that's not an unhealthy conversation. It's how you do it that makes the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy one. So what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? Claire, I'm just going to stop here for a second before we go to our second poll. Claire, any questions or anything in there that's of anything I need to be aware of just at the minute? Nothing? Cool. I don't know if people can do emojis or anything, but they can throw them up as well. All right, fantastic. So thinking about what I've just said, so thinking about your state and where you're at, and I'm just going to go back to the Slido. Terrific. I want you to think about the first question you've got is recall an awful conversation. So think about who said what to whom. What emotions do you feel? Where does this show up in your body? And what I want you to do is just do a word dump. So type a word, hit send, type a word. You can do as many as you like, I hope. And we'll start to see what that looks like. So a little word cloud should come up for you. I usually feel bad. So I'm just going to use the word bad. Excellent. So we're getting words like frustrated, angry, anxious. These are the big ones at the moment. Perspiration, nice pickup, you know, because we are, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but we are physically impacted by this. Yeah. Awkward, worried, upset. I don't know about you, but I'm one of these people. I ruminate over conversations that didn't go well. I spend way too much ruminating. Yeah. I think the A's are having it at the minute, the angry, annoyed, frustrated. All right. So that's what happens when we're recalling an awful conversation. So let's move on to the next question, which is, what about a wonderful conversation? You know, what emotions did you feel? Where did this show up? Yeah. Here we go. Ah, yay. There we go. It's on the screen now, I think. It's on my screen anyway. Happy, positive, valued, enthusiastic, elated. I bet it was probably almost easier to answer this one than it was the first one. Although being human beings, we tend to go for the negative first. It's kind of hardwired into us. So happy has certainly got the gist for today. Oh, lovely, smiley. Good job. Right. So thank you for that. And just trying to see the bottom of my screen. Make sure I'm back here. And I am. There we go. And we're back. So well done. So these conversations are important. So let's move a little bit more into the world of words create worlds. So this is really, again, coming from the world of conversational intelligence. But here's a statistic that some research that happened a few years ago now, but I doubt that this has changed much. So if you think about the world, something like 16 trillions of words per day, and lots of conversations are had all around the world, everywhere. And statistically, particularly in the work environment, 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. Let's think about that for a minute. So we talk about cost saving, right? So if we go into an organizational setting for a minute, you know, we talk about cost saving. We talk a little bit about conversational waste. When we think of how many times we have to repeat ourselves, or the outcome that we got wasn't quite the one that we were expecting. So all of these are the types of conversations that we're saying have missed the mark, right? So in that case, words do create worlds. Yeah. So how can we change this? So conversations trigger different parts of our brain, and we're going to go into a little bit of brain science here in a minute. So which will either catalyze trust and create new ideas, or they create protective habits and leading us to conversational breakdowns or shutdowns. Yeah. So the better we get at this conversational, mastering our conversations, the better ability we have to see and to understand when our connections with others are working or not working as well as they should. And really what we're here to is we all have goals that we want to achieve each day, or, you know, when we're on the job, whatever the case may be. So the better we improve our conversations, if we master our conversations, we speed up time, we gain time, because we're not having to spend time wasted in repeating ourselves, or worse, right? Or we have to have conversations with people that we don't, about productivity, for example, or safety conversations. You know, how many times we have to repeat ourselves even in that space. Yeah. So it lays the groundwork for more successful and trusting relationships. So that's really what this is about. I need to do a time check. Yep. Okay, we're good. So conversational intelligence, as I was alluding to, it fuels that connection. It drives resilience. It creates stronger organizations because we're actually communicating. whether it's a change management program, whether it's sending a report to somebody, whether it's having a safety intervention, whether it's trying to get budget approval, right? It applies to everything. The conversations we have with our salespeople, the salespeople with our potential clients. So conversational and mastering these conversations is really key. And it's key, fundamental, and I heard you say earlier, Claire, about 45,003, this underpins psychological safety as well. Now, that's not entirely psych safety, but it's part of the process. So it helps to improve psychological safety. If people start to feel safer in their ability to have conversations, you know, and understand how they shape the relationships that we're with. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of brain wisdom here for a minute. So we talk about this, that we say that we now have 6 brains. I mean, I think many of us thought for a long time that there was a brain up here and then the rest was the body, and that they were 2 independent units. They so are not, right? In fact, we probably get more information from our gut going up than the other way, depending on which part of the brain we're talking about. So our gut brain, which is instinct, how we feel, how we take care of ourselves, is really important when we talk about conversational mastery. Our heart, how are we feeling in here? And we know, somebody mentioned this, perspiration, stickiness, flushed faces, all of these things. If we're not feeling good about a conversation we're in, or we've just had a really sad conversation with somebody, we can feel it. It hurts. Yeah. So then we'll go into this part of the brain here. So at the back of our brain, we talk about our primitive brain. And that is the oldest brain that we have. It's where the amygdala lives, which is a little almond-shaped thing. It's very small, actually. But it is the original part. And this is where our fear, fright, flight, or appease comes from. And you could effectively, you can call it your security guard. Now, the amygdala, or our security guard, is on the job 24/7 every single day of our life. It is constantly looking for danger. Now, once upon a time, it was saber-toothed tigers. Today, it could be a piece of equipment, it could be a car, it could be another person. All right? It could be the different color carpet you're not used to. So it is constantly looking for, am I going to be safe in this moment, in this second, in this instance? Right? Or do I need to run away? Or do I need to fight? Or do I just go say, yep, yes, sir, 3 bags full, sir, and leave me alone so I can get on with it? Right? So that's kind of the options that the security guard has. Now, of course, it talks to the limbic region, the neocortex. So the limbic is our emotional center. So, and emotions it stores everything that we feel, and our emotions are actually our dispositions for action. We don't function without our emotional selves. So emotions are, if you break it down, is emotion. They drive us to do anything. Without them, nothing really happens. So depending on what state we're in, so if you think about the state again, that traffic light system, it's kind of an easy way to tap into my state of fear. How am I feeling? What is my gut telling me? And what is my emotional state telling me? Yeah. So the neocortex is where we do language and reasoning. It's the knowledge center. So this is like the library of the brain. Inside the limbic region, just coming back to that emotional center again, is also where a lot of our chemicals are stored and get mixed. So we have a lot of chemicals coming through our system all the time. And I'll talk about our 2 common ones in a moment that actually impact the way that we communicate and show up for a conversation. And then, of course, we have the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is the newest brain of all. This is the executive brain. It's the boss, if you like. And this is where we have critical thinking, visioning, innovation, empathy, which is the ability to put yourself into someone else's shoes or under their umbrella. It's the bonding side. So it is the newest, but it's the one that gets shut down the quickest. So we talk about fast brain, slow brain. If I use my fist as an example for a minute, we talk about the gut brain's down here. And when we feel something, so if you're in a moment where something doesn't feel right, you'll feel it here before anywhere else. So you'll get some sort of a trigger that goes up through the primitive brain and through across here to the prefrontal cortex. Now, what's happening is in here, if you think about the thumb as the amygdala, right, so that primitive brain or the security guard, what happens is if we've got this feeling comes up and this is being frightened, this kind of happens. The amygdala comes out, the prefrontal cortex, we actually call it an amygdala hijack, right? And this what happens on top. Then the amygdala is taking over. Now, the amygdala in the limbic region is fast thinking, fast reacting. It really speeds up. So if we're not careful, then this happens, right? And funny enough, this looks like fight, doesn't it, right? When you've got the thumb on the outside. So the prefrontal cortex is the slower part of our thinking brain, right? So we need to employ tactics to sometimes slow down any of the more unpleasant feelings that we might have in a conversation. So the 6 brains all work together. We tend to feel things in the gut first, that instinct, that immediate feeling, and then it works its way through here, which can happen very, very fast, by the way. Yeah, what we have to manage is this part of the brain, the boss saying, whoa, slow down. I need to just take a breath, calm down my little fear, fright, flight person back there, and let me take stock. You know, that's why we use things like step back 5 by 5. I used to work for Exxon a little bit, so that was one of those. But right, so that's one of the reasons that we've employed some of those tactics in the safety world is, you know, how do we the authority to stop work? Why? You know, often people will get, you know, when the hairs go up at the back of your neck, that's not the time to push forward. It's the time to actually stop, slow down and think and see what's going on around us. Yeah. So with that little bit of knowledge about that little tiny bit of brain science here, and I'm just doing a time check. Yep, we're good. Oof, okay. I wanted to talk about the conversational dashboard. So when you're over here, you'll see there's words here. We use resistor, skeptic, wait and see, moving them through to experimenter to co-creator. What you'll also see here is when we're in the space of resistance or skepticism, and physically I represent this by, you know, if we're like this in a situation or we're leaning back in a meeting and we're not feeling very good about it, you know, we tend to be in a more resistant, skeptical side of state, if you wish. We tend to be operating from a space of I. So we tend to be protective of ourselves. If we were in a room, I would actually get you to physically do this, but you can do it if you want to, right? But, you know, when you're closing your arms across yourself, and I'm not talking about just relaxed hanging about, that's fine. But, you know, usually when we're not happy in a situation, we tend to sit back. We try to sometimes make ourselves feel smaller. There's lots of body language that comes into this. So this is something to be observing as well. So when we're in that resistor skepticism, moving into wait and see, we're operating from what we say is low trust, right? Because we're now triggering reactions within ourselves to protect ourselves. As we move around the dashboard, we move into the wait and see, you know, sitting on the fence. That's what we say conditional trust. And that's, you know, well, I might just see what the others do before I move forward. And then as we move further forward into experimenter and co-creator state, it's where we start to operate from high trust. And that's when we kind of feel more open. And even if you use your own arms doing this right now, even if in this moment, if you did this, it feels different to this. You know, you feel more exposed. But with that exposure, you open yourself up to opportunity and opportunity within a conversation. So that's when we say we're going more into partnering mode, and in a conversation that might look like, well, okay, so we've got this scenario. Tell me a little bit more about how you feel about that. Let's talk about that. What can we do about that? There's a bit more sort of back and forth and coming to co-creating the outcomes. Whereas if you're more in that low trust resistor, you're like, okay, no, this is what I want it to be. Right? I'm not going to listen to you. And listening is a really important component in all of this. And we're not going to talk much about listening today because that's a whole another subject. Right? So when we move over to that we side, we're working more from our executive brain. If we're sitting over on that low trust resistor side, we're operating more from that emotional, primitive security side of our brain. So trust changes reality. So if we're operating from a distrustful perspective, we tend to reveal less, we expect things to go wrong, we assume the worst, we look with caution, we interpret with fear, we tell secrets, and we become a little bit yes people. Actually, yep, just leave me alone. Right? When we go to the trusting side, then we tend to be, as I say, more open, we reveal ourselves, we expect the unexpected, we actually invite it, we listen for what might be not working, but with a positive outlook, if you want. You know, we make better assumptions, we have a bit more heartfelt, and we interpret with, we're better at listening for the facts rather than blaming or, starting from a position of blame. We'll look for, well, what's the learning in something? We're a little bit more into the truth telling, and we actually invite truth telling. So the more that we operate from here, we tend to be more far-sighted. The more that we operate from the rear of our brain, we tend to be a lot more short-sighted, which is what we're talking about. And the two key components to this is our chemical cocktails. Oh, I'll come back to that one. Chemical cocktails, which I'll come to in a second. Fun fact about time: when we first interact with a situation or another person, judgments are made, but it's still only 10 seconds, but this is considered slow. In 1 second, we make conclusions. In 10 seconds, we make decisions. In 12 to 18 seconds, listening goes inside. So if we're not enjoying that conversation for whatever reason, we stop listening out here. But that takes about 12 to 18 seconds before we do that. So there's an opportunity here. What happens very fast is it takes 0.77 of seconds for first impressions to be made. Now, this is not necessarily consciously, but that's how fast it happens. We all go, like for this with trust, we know how fast we can lose trust and how long it takes to get it back. And we tend to, and this was an interesting one for me, and I had to think about this when I first saw it, because what does happen if we start to feel not trust, and we don't like something, we tend to speak less. Our voice goes in. Yeah. Our chemical cocktails: cortisol and oxytocin. We all are probably fairly aware that if we have a lot of cortisol in our system, which can make us quite anxious, makes us stressed, makes us not feel great, can actually be a health condition if we have too much of it. But it is a mobilizer. We do need it. And in fact, if we didn't have it first thing in the morning, which is when it's at its highest, we wouldn't actually probably get out of bed. So we do need cortisol to move us. It is our mobilizing hormone. Conversely, we have our bonding hormone, or sometimes called the hug hormone, oxytocin. And this is when we're relaxed and we want to have a positive view of most situations. So in our conversations, these two chemicals are very important, but they are being mixed by us constantly, yeah, all the time. So we need both. But what we need to learn is how do we downregulate cortisol and upregulate oxytocin. The interesting fact here is that, roughly speaking, cortisol, a dose of cortisol lasts about up to 27 hours. Oxytocin only lasts 3 or 4. So we need to have more oxytocin to help downregulate stress and other emotions like that that can be produced through too much cortisol in the system. So really, I'm not going to spend any time here, but really what we need to think about is if you think about the dashboard, so how do we improve our conversations to move us across to the right when it's appropriate to do so? So if we can downregulate some of those words that you can see, they are depleting words. We want to upregulate the nourishing words. And those, if you think about those words or those feelings, those emotions that you can see there, which ones do you do or not do? Yeah. So another very quick poll. Oops. Okay. Might have to, we'll see how we go here. So another quick poll. The next one, and I realize this is a bit fast and furious. What do you feel that you might need to do less of? So if you think about those chemical triggers, and particularly in common safety situations, but that's a very interesting time thing. What do you need to do less of? Yeah, rushing, self-doubt, overthinking, assuming. You know that word assume, you know what that means if you break it up? Makes an ass of you and me. So worry, overthinking, procrastination, working, conflict, reacting too quickly, judging too quickly, critical. We can be a bit more, we can be critical. So it's all of these things. But you know, thinking about our security guard and our primitive brain, they're really quick to come to the fore. You know? So we do need to have that awareness and understand how to manage that. Fantastic. So let's move to the next question, which is what do you need to do more of? There it is. Yep. So what have we got? Relax, empathize, understanding, listen, delegate. Yeah. Sometimes that's a really good plan. Praise, walk away, take a breath. Absolutely. Smile. I remember years ago when we used to have telephones on the end of cords. That's giving away a lot. But anyway, used to be able to say, you know, you can always tell if somebody's happy or not if they're smiling when they're talking to you on the phone, even if you can't see them. Relate. Yeah, I think listening is starting to get center position here. And it really is key to all of this. But as I say, that's a whole nother session. Thank you for joining in on those quick polls. We'll probably see if we can extract them and add them into something somewhere along the line here. All right, I'm going to move along. There is a thing what we call conversational essentials. And I'm just going to quickly go through 3 of them, and then I'm probably going to stop the session from there. There is 5 elements of blind spots, but we might share that in a different way. So priming for trust is one, but before you even do any of these 5 essentials, you need to be open to influence. So that's where tapping into your state. Where am I in? Am I open to hearing what the other scenario or the person or situation is in front of me? I'm not going to talk about priming for trust today because that's quite a big topic, but you know, there's 3 here that I'm going to tap into. So ask questions for which you have no answers. It is such a powerful tool. Listen to connect, not judge, confirm, or reject. And double clicking. I'm going to come to that one in a minute. It's a favorite of mine. So let's ask questions for which you have no answers. Be curious. Now, curious is an emotion, and it moves us to investigate, to ask questions. So one of the core principles of curiosity is that by nature it engages us with immerse. Sorry, what was that?
Sorry to interrupt. We can't see your slides. They've stopped sharing when I shared my screen.
I didn't see your screen. That's why I didn't. No problems. Can you see that now?
Yeah, all good.
All right. So I'll just go back. Thank you for telling me that. There we go. These were the 5 things I'm going to talk about. So the first one is ask questions for which you have no answers. As I was saying, curiosity is an emotion. And interesting, when we talk about emotional literacy, we're not really taught much about emotions, to be honest, throughout our lifetimes. We kind of know the top 12, if you like anger and sad and happy and whatever, but there's well over 250 plus emotions. And that's another body of work. So it helps us to engage. So the story behind that emotion of curiosity is, I believe there is something here of value to me, and I want to find out more. Right? Every emotion has a story, and then it has something that is of value to us. So you think about curiosity when it's unwritten rules, work is done, communication, the behaviors you reward and punish. So if we see a scenario, and I'll go back to, in the days when I was offshore, I used to be all over the rig and speak to every single person on the rig. And sometimes I'm certainly not going to know everything that they do. I don't even know if that's sometimes the right tool they should be using, because nobody can know everything on a rig or a work site. Everybody has a place. And so it was one of the best tools that I had at my disposal was to be curious. And I would just say to people, I said, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing? Obviously, be safe and don't just interrupt for the sake of it. But, find out, because people like to tell you what they're doing. And if they tell you and explain why they're doing something the way that they're doing it, and you just quietly listen, it gives you information to then be able to help them have a different perspective, maybe. Or more interestingly, they may be using their own grey matter, their brains, to figure out maybe I should be doing something different. And that way you'll have a much better way of changing the outcome. So if you think of changing conversations, changes the mind, changes the outcome. So our role is to influence. So be curious, ask questions for me have no answers. And even if you do think you've got the answer, pretend you don't. It's a really good skill to have. Listening, to connect, not judge, confirm, correct, or reject. Even if you think you know the answer, you may know the rules, you may have seen it all before, but that person in front of you, or in a situation if you're having to have an intervention with somebody, you need to listen to their side of the story. We talk about learning cultures. This is a very important component to learning cultures. By listening, listen to what they're saying, what they are actually saying. And one of the biggest tricks with listening to connect is to not be listening to yourself. And that takes practice, and it's a lifelong practice. When you go into a conversation, as a coach, you get a lot of learning and training around this. But even then, it's difficult because we think, oh, I've heard this before. You go, actually, I haven't heard it from this person before. So let me listen in and just listen and then see what they are thinking. There's some nice questions you can ask. And if you want to think about curiosity, you can say things like, interesting, tell me more about that. And is there anything else about that situation? So you're not putting your thought into those words. You're just using clean language to draw out, to pull rather than push the conversation, which is where we're trying to work with. The next one, and this is one of my favorites, and it's called double clicking. I've worked a lot in multicultural environments, so this is where it can get. I mean, this whole land is very multicultural, so we all work in multicultural environments, really. But multicultural can be from 3 villages in the same country, especially in the UK. I mean, I live in a village in the northeast of Scotland, and I can go 3 villages that way, and it's different, So in conversations, we use this as a way of asking for more information without shame or embarrassment for the person that was speaking and for you, the person that's trying to understand. So we're trying to use it as a tool to have shared understanding. And so the question is, how can we easily let someone know that we need more information or clarity? And I'm sure we've all been in situations where you say, sorry, I need to interrupt. I don't understand what you're saying here. Can you tell me a little bit more? And you know, depending on the environment you're in, some people won't do that because they may feel they're going to embarrass the person. It might be their supervisor, it might be their boss, whoever it is. So this double clicking comes from the metaphor of, you know, when we press a mouse, what are we doing? We're trying to delve a little deeper, right? So we can all get into the habit of asking others to double click. So what might that actually look like? So we ask, get into a habit and share it with people. Share this far and wide. Use it whenever you're feeling unsure or curious or don't understand something. And simply just say, can I double click on that? This becomes what we call a conversational ritual. So you might go back to your team and say, listen, I want to introduce this idea. So it saves time. And if everybody is on the same page, when you say, oh, can I double click on that? They'll go, oh, okay, you need more information. I don't have to get into an emotional dialogue about why I want to interrupt you. Yeah, it's short, sweet, and to the point. And it works. It works really, really well. So that's a little gift, this one, actually. It's double clicking for clarity. I'm going to do a check-in here. Claire, where would you like me to go? I do have a little bit more here, 5 common blind spots, but I realize I've already done quite a lot of information here and there might be some questions.
So we've got one question in the Q&A.
Okay.
So if you want to spend 2 or 3 minutes more.
Okay. So I'll probably just skip through this really fast and get to the end, and then we'll come to questions. So the 5 blind spots are, because I've mentioned them now, assuming everyone thinks like you. They don't. Everybody's a different observer of the world. We all see the world differently. If I asked everyone to describe the same color white, everybody would describe it differently. People see color differently. They feel the energy around them differently. And as the speaker, if I think that everybody thinks like me, I'm going to end up in some trouble. And that's why we get, well, why don't people get what I'm seeing? Because we don't. We're all different. We are all individual observers of our world. Trust changes reality. We've really already touched on this one anyway. So if we're not setting up situated conversations for a trusting interaction, then the conversation will not go well. So understanding your state and then maybe helping others understand them. And it could be like asking, how are they feeling? Those sorts of things before you go into a conversation. And, you know, not beating about the bush is actually quite helpful as well. So those are things to think about. Because people shut down very quickly, as we said, 0.07 of a second. So think about how can you build trust. Failing to empathize, we sort of touched on this as well. So if we don't have that empathy, if we have the inability to stand in someone else's shoes when we are feeling fearful or upset, they're going to be the same way. Yeah. So consider the impact if the person you're in a conversation with isn't empathizing with you. If you're feeling like, oh, he's just not getting it, or he wants my job, as this image is sort of saying, right? So failing to empathize. So we sometimes call it standing underneath someone else's umbrella. I remember, therefore I know. We think we remember everything we hear or are told, but if you try to retell it, it's your version of that story. We spend a lot of time making movies up about what we hear. So the assumption that we remember what others are telling us when actually remember what we think they are saying can be a dangerous place. So research, this is interesting. We drop out of conversations every 12 to 18 seconds to process what people are saying. So in that dropout, right, and everybody has different levels of processing power as well. So it's very important to think about or not assume that everybody understands what I'm saying. And just because I'm speaking, the value is in the value that the listener gets from what I'm saying, not the other way around. And 5, meaning resides in the listener, which is actually what I just meant. So meaning is with you, the listeners. So I hope you understood a little bit of what I was trying to say today. Right, and because if you think about our security guard back there and the our chemistry lab that we have up here, as well as our neocortex, which is our library, the amygdala has a chat to the librarian regularly. So it's forever checking in when we're having conversations with people saying, have I heard that before? No, I haven't. Okay, this is new information. No, that's old information. So this is very busy up here when we're having conversations. So on that very speedy moment, I shall wrap up with, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, by Maya Angelou. So we did a quick session on, your job now is to think about, well, what kind of conversation do you want to be better at after this session? Remember, that was kind of the objective at the beginning. So what's one action that you will implement beyond this workshop today? We covered things like changing conversations, minds, and outcomes, better conversations, the 3-state traffic model, the wisdom of the 6 brains, the conversational dashboard, how do we move from I to we, chemical cocktails, how do we down-regulate cortisol and up-regulate oxytocin, the conversational sessions, essentials, 3 of which were asking questions for which I have no answers, double-clicking, and I think what the 3rd one was just at this moment, but anyway. And then, of course, our 5 common blind spots. So on that note, I said at the few slides back that there's an invitation here. I have asked for permission to do this. So feel free to join me in what I'm calling the Supervisors Hub. It's a community for like-minded leaders and safety leaders to continue these conversations. Some of these little workshops that are in there that you can actually continue doing. So at the moment, it is free for you to join. So feel free to scan that. I'll leave that up there for the moment. I'm in there all the time. Well, getting more and more in there. It's a fairly new community, but I've always wanted to have a space for us that are in the field, who are frontline leaders who need a space to get some support. So you'll get that not just from me, but from everybody else that's in that community. There you go. That's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Karin. So the first question was regarding people still using Teams and or emails even when they're back in the office. So this is an organisation which has hybrid working, some days in the office, some days at home. And the question is, when we're still in the office, we are still sending emails or Teams, and is that just a post-COVID thing? And then the follow-on question is there a measure of how more effective a face-to-face conversation is rather than an email or Teams?
That is an enormous question, and thank you for it, because it's a really valid one. I'll say this, when it comes to, doing on Teams or emails or WhatsApps or the variety of other tools that we use, nothing beats face-to-face in many ways, right? In terms of building relationship, right? So I think face-to-face is always going to be important. And I think what the pandemic did for us was move the needle forward in terms that it gave us more opportunity to connect with more people, which in some ways can be challenging. But so what's really important is when you're using these mediums to have conversations, be intentional. Right? When you're face to face with someone, because you can see facial expressions and body expressions, and you actually get physical energy from that person, you will get physical energy from that person. So it gives us more information. But when we're using technology to communicate, we need to be more intentional. So we should be very careful about, not just quickly replying to things, or because those tools are amazing. They really are, and I'm a big advocate of them, actually. But you do need to be careful about how you interact. There probably is some research, and I must admit I probably need to do a little bit of my own to go into that. There's lots of conflicting research about, their productivity, for example, is up when people work from home, but their well-being is maybe not so much. But in the office, well-being is a bit higher, but productivity is down. So, you know, and all of that is impacted on how we communicate and the conversations that we have. The other thing that's important here is some people are better in this space than others, you know, because we're all different. So there's a lot of factors. I don't think there's any sort of black and white answer to that. I hope that was a helpful answer.
Thanks, Karin. Amir, have we time for another question?
Yeah, we can do another question.
Right. So this next question is, when you know a situation is full of distrust and being distrustful is an appropriate stance to have, how do you ensure the conversation is still effective without being walked all over?
I think I just saw that one. You know, when there's a lot of distrust and distrustful in the room, whatever that space is, I think you got to take care of yourself, interestingly enough, first, because you're going to be trying to do that anyway. And again, it depends on the situation. You know, why is there distrust in the room? What's going on in the team that isn't working, or in that meeting? Why do you feel like it's not happening for you? So I think without knowing the fuller context of that scenario, it depends really. You need to take care of yourself and see how you can step up. But there is more at play here. It's about understanding yourself, understanding the others. What is the context? And context matters a lot across all of these situations. Always happy to have a conversation offline about some of these things. So that's sort of where we do some coaching. But yeah, coming from the gut and shaping the brain's thinking of leadership beyond organizational hierarchy. Yeah. Is that the question? Oh, analogy. Gotcha. Most information coming from the gut. Well, I mean, there's a lot of information going both ways, but I think what's surprising to people is how much is actually going this way. And of course, what we eat impacts that, right? So if we think of our well-being, if we think of mental health, if we are not taking care of the body in the right way, that will impact how we show up mentally and therefore inside conversations as well.
Thanks, Karin. I'm not sure now, Amir, if we need to wrap it up and just thank everybody for attending.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you, Karin. That was really, really thought-provoking. I have got some questions of my own, but I will contact you outside of that, and hopefully we share all the questions and answers. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We'll hopefully see you on the 4th of June for the 45,003 webinar. And lastly, thank you ever so much to Karin for her time and the offer of joining that network, which sounds fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.